Imagine a life where you're the invisible one, overlooked, blamed, sacrificed. I'm Violet, the sister who faded into the shadows while my glamorous sibling Allie stole the spotlight. I worked myself to the bone for my family, only to uncover a web of lies. Allie was living a lavish life off my sweat. This is my story of breaking free from betrayal, finding my worth, and blooming anew. Raw, real, and unforgettable. Stick around. You won't see the end coming. My name is Violet, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the shadow in my family's spotlight. Not the kind of shadow that looms large or demands attention, just the faint gray outline you step over without noticing. My younger sister, Allie, was the sun. Golden, dazzling, impossible to ignore. I don't know when it started, this unspoken rule that she was the one who mattered, but by the time I was old enough to question it, the pattern was set in stone. I was 6 when Allie was born, and even then I could feel the shift. My parents, mom with her tired eyes and dad with his loud, commanding voice, had always been practical people. They weren't cruel, not in the obvious ways you see in movies. No slamming doors or shouting matches. Just a quiet, steady drift of attention away from me and toward her. I remember Mom cradling Allie in the hospital, her face glowing like I'd never seen before. "She's perfect," she whispered, and Dad nodded, his big hand resting on Allie's tiny head. I stood there, clutching a crumpled drawing I'd made for them, waiting for someone to look at me. No one did. Growing up, I told myself it was fine. Allie was younger, prettier, louder. She had this laugh that could fill a room, and eyes that sparkled like she was in on some cosmic joke the rest of us missed. I was quieter, plainer brown hair that never held a curl, a face that didn't turn heads. I wasn't jealous, not at first. I loved her. She was my little sister, and I wanted to protect her, to be the steady one so she could shine. But love gets complicated when it's a one-way street. By the time I was a teenager, I'd figured out my role, the responsible one. Mom worked long shifts at the diner, and Dad's construction jobs came and went like the tides. Money was always tight, and I learned early that if I wanted anything, school supplies, clothes, a chance at college, I'd have to make it happen myself. So I did. I babysat, mowed lawns, worked the cash register at the corner store after school. I saved every penny, dreaming of a future where I could stand on my own. Allie didn't have to worry about that. She was the dreamer, the one with potential. Mom would say it all the time. Allie's gonna do big things. She's got that spark. Meanwhile, I was the workhorse, the one who kept the lights on. When I was 18, I got a full-time job at a call center, answering angry customer complaints for minimum wage. I handed over most of my paycheck to Mom every month. Rent, groceries, whatever they needed. I didn't mind. It was what you did for family, right? But then there was the blame. It crept in slowly, like damp rot in the walls. "Violet, why can't you be more like Allie?" Dad would mutter when I came home exhausted, too tired to smile. "She's got ambition. You're just here." Mom was subtler but sharper. "You're so selfish sometimes, Violet. Allie's out there chasing her dreams, and all you do is complain." I didn't complain. I barely spoke. But somehow, in their eyes, I was the problem. Allie, meanwhile, was untouchable. She'd graduated high school with mediocre grades, but you'd think she'd won a Nobel Prize the way Mom bragged about her. She started modeling local stuff at first, mall fashion shows and car dealership ads. She'd breeze in and out of the house, all glitter and perfume, tossing her glossy blonde hair and talking about auditions in LA or New York. "I'm going to be famous," she'd say, and Mom would beam like it was already true. I'd nod, force a smile, and go back to balancing the checkbook so we wouldn't lose the house. I don't know when I started to feel invisible. Maybe it was the Christmas I was 22, when I'd worked double shifts to buy everyone gifts practical things, like a new coat for Mom and a toolbox for Dad. Allie showed up empty-handed, claiming she'd spent her last paycheck on headshots, and they laughed it off. "That's our ally," Dad said, ruffling her hair. My gifts sat unopened under the tree until I put them away myself. By the time I was 28, I'd moved out. Not far, just a cramped studio apartment a few miles from my parents' place. I'd gotten a better job, managing accounts for a small shipping company. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I was good at it. I still sent money home every month. Allie was 22 then, living with Mom and Dad rent-free, supposedly between gigs. She'd started a YouTube channel makeup tutorials and lifestyle vlogs and claimed it was her big break. "I just need a little more time," she'd say, and they'd nod like it was gospel. I tried to believe in her too. I watched her videos, left comments, even sent her a ring light for better filming. She never thanked me. Instead, she'd call me up, voice sweet as honey, asking for a little loan to cover rent or a new camera. "You're so good with money, Vi," she'd say. "I'll pay you back when I'm famous." I gave it to her every time. I don't know why guilt, maybe, or some dumb hope that she'd finally see me. Then came the breaking point. It was a rainy Tuesday in October, and I was at Mom's house fixing a leak in the kitchen sink. Dad was at work, and Mom was hovering, complaining about how I hadn't visited enough. Allie burst in, all drama and tears, clutching her phone. "My channel's dead," she wailed. "The algorithm hates me. I need to rebrand new equipment, a trip to LA, everything. Violet, you have to help me." I wiped my hands on a rag, my back aching from bending over the pipes. "Allie, I can't. I'm stretched thin as it is." Her face hardened, that spark in her eyes turning cold. "You're so selfish," she snapped. "All you care about is your stupid little life. I'm trying to make something of myself." Mom jumped in, voice sharp. "She's right, Violet. You've got a good job. Why can't you support your sister? She's got a real shot." I stood there, dripping wet, staring at them. Something snapped inside me. Not loud or dramatic, just a quiet crack, like a twig underfoot. "I've been supporting all of you," I said, my voice shaking. "For years. Where's my shot?" They didn't answer. Allie stormed off, and Mom just shook her head, muttering about how ungrateful I was. I left that night without fixing the sink, drove home in the rain, and sat in my dark apartment, wondering how I'd let it come to this. That was the moment I started to see the truth. But it wasn't until months later, when the lies unraveled, that I understood just how deep the betrayal went. The weeks after that rainy night at Mom's house felt like walking through fog. I went through the motions work, home, sleep, but something had shifted inside me. I couldn't shake the echo of my own words. "I've been supporting all of you. Where's my shot?" It was the first time I'd said it out loud, and it hung there, heavy and unanswered. I didn't know what to do with it, so I buried it under routine. But the crack in my foundation was widening, and soon enough, the whole damn house would come down. It started with a phone call from Dad, about 2 months later. December had just rolled in, cold and gray, and I was at my desk, crunching numbers for a client. My phone buzzed, his name flashing on the screen. I almost didn't pick up. Dad never called unless he needed something, but guilt tugged at me and I answered. "Violet, we're in a bind," he said. "No hello, no how are you. The heat's out, and the repair guy wants $500 up front. Can you spot us? Allie's got some big audition coming up, and we're strapped." I stared at my computer screen, the numbers blurring. $500. That was half my rent, money I'd been saving for a new winter coat because mine was threadbare. "Dad, I don't have it," I said, quieter than I meant to. He sighed, that long, disappointed sound I knew too well. "Come on, Vi. You always figure it out. Allie needs this shot. Don't let her down." I hung up without saying goodbye, my chest tight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it. Dad's voice, Mom's accusations, Allie's tears. I'd given them everything, years of paychecks, late nights, my own dreams, and it still wasn't enough. Why was it never enough? The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I said no. I texted Dad, short and simple. I can't this time, sorry. My hands shook as I hit send, but I felt a strange flicker of relief. It didn't last long. An hour later, Mom called, furious. How dare you abandon us? Allie's devastated. You're so ungrateful, Violet. After all we've done for you. I didn't argue. I just listened, let her words crash over me like waves, and hung up when she was done. But the guilt gnawed at me, and by the end of the week, I caved. I sent them $300, not the full amount, but enough to quiet the noise in my head. I told myself it was the last time. I should have known better. The real unraveling came a few weeks later, right before Christmas. I was at the grocery store, picking up a frozen dinner for one, when my phone pinged with a text from an old high school friend, Jess. She'd moved away years ago, but still kept in touch sporadically. Hey Vi, saw Allie's latest post. She's living it up. You must be proud. Attached was a screenshot from Instagram Allie, lounging by a pool in a bikini, cocktail in hand. Caption: Chasing dreams in LA. Grateful for the grind. The timestamp was yesterday. I froze in the aisle, the cold from the freezer seeping into my bones. LA? Allie hadn't mentioned a trip. She'd told Mom and Dad she was broke, that her audition was local, that she needed their help and mine to get by. I clicked through her profile, public and polished, a curated gallery of glamour. More photos. Allie at a rooftop bar, Allie in a designer dress, Allie posing with some B-list influencer. Posts going back weeks, months even. She hadn't been between gigs. She'd been living a life I couldn't dream of affording. My hands trembled as I scrolled, piecing it together. The money I'd sent her, the loans for cameras, rent, headshots hadn't gone to any of that. She'd been funneling it into this, her shiny, fake little world. And Mom and Dad? They'd been covering for her, or worse, they didn't even know. I felt sick, betrayed, but mostly stupid. How had I not seen it? I drove straight to their house, the anger building with every mile. When I walked in, Mom was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, and Dad was on the couch, beer in hand. Allie wasn't there, big surprise. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady for once. Mom barely looked up. If it's about the money, Violet, we'll pay you back when we can. It's not about that, I snapped, holding up my phone. It's about this. Allie's in LA, living like some Instagram star, while I'm killing myself to keep you all afloat. What the hell is going on? Dad sat up, frowning. What are you talking about? She's at an audition. No, she's not. I shoved the screen in his face, the poolside photo glaring back at him. She's been lying. To all of us. Where's the money I gave her going? Where's the money I gave you going? Mom dropped the spoon, her face paling. That's not Violet. You're overreacting. She's working hard out there. Working hard? I laughed, bitter and loud. I've been working hard. I've been paying your bills, fixing your sink, sending her cash for her dreams. And she's sipping margaritas while you call me selfish? Dad stood, his voice rising. Watch your tone. She's your sister. She's trying. Stop defending her, I shouted, cutting him off. It felt good, that release, like a dam breaking. Look at the dates, Dad. She's been gone for weeks, months maybe. And you're still begging me for money because she's got you convinced she's struggling. She's not. She's using us. They didn't say anything for a long moment. Mom stared at the floor, and Dad's jaw tightened. But I could see it, the doubt creeping in. I didn't wait for them to argue. I turned and left, slamming the door behind me. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of cheap wine, scrolling through Allie's lies. I found more credit card charges on my old statements. Small amounts I'd never questioned, linked to her name. She'd had access to my account years ago, back when I'd trusted her to borrow my card for emergencies. She'd never stopped. Thousands of dollars siphoned off over time. My savings, my safety net, gone. I called her. She picked up on the third ring, voice breezy. "Hey, Vi, what's up?" "You're a liar," I said, no preamble. "I know everything. The money, the trips, the life you've been faking." "It's over, Allie. I'm done." She laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. You've got plenty. I just needed a little boost." "A little boost?" I choked out. "You stole from me, from Mom and Dad. You let them think I was the bad guy." "Violet, you're blowing this out of proportion. I'll pay you back when I—" "No," I cut her off. "You won't. I'm cutting you off. All of you." I hung up before she could respond, blocked her number, and sat there, shaking. It wasn't just anger, it was grief, raw and jagged for the family I'd tried to hold together. But beneath it, there was something else. A spark. Faint, but alive. For the first time, I saw a way out. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My apartment was quiet. The kind of quiet that used to feel lonely but now felt like a blank slate. Allie's voice still echoed in my head. "Don't be dramatic." But it didn't sting anymore. It just made me tired. Tired of her, tired of them, tired of being the one who always bent so they wouldn't break. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't going to be clean or easy, nothing with my family ever was. But I couldn't keep living like this, a ghost in my own life. I called in sick to work, something I hadn't done in years, and drove back to Mom and Dad's house. The air was crisp, the sky a dull gray, and my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolute. When I walked in, Mom was at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee in her hands, and Dad was pacing by the window, phone pressed to his ear. He hung up when he saw me, his face a mix of irritation and exhaustion. "Violet," he started, "if you're here to stir up more trouble—" "I'm not," I said, cutting him off. My voice was steady, firmer than I expected. "I'm here to tell you the truth, and then I'm done." Mom looked up, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. Allie's Instagram photos already open. "She's been lying to you, to me, for years. She's not struggling. She's not chasing dreams. She's living off the money I've been giving you. Money you've been giving her. And she's been stealing from me too. Look at the dates, the posts. She's been in LA for months, maybe longer." Dad snatched the phone, scrolling through the pictures, his frown deepening. Mom leaned over, her breath catching. "This doesn't prove anything," she said, but her voice wavered. She's trying to make it." "Stop it," I snapped, and they both flinched. I'd never raised my voice like that, not to them. "She's not trying. She's using you. She's using me. I've been paying your bills, fixing your house, sending her cash for her dreams, and she's been laughing all the way to the bank. I found charges on my card, thousands, Mom. She's been draining me dry, and you let her." Dad tossed the phone down, his face red. "You're saying we're bad parents because we believed her?" "No," I said, softer now. "I'm saying you're blind. You've always seen her, never me. I've been here, holding everything together, and you've blamed me for not doing more. I'm done being invisible." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel sorry. Not this time. "Violet, we didn't mean—" she started, but I held up a hand. "You did. Maybe you didn't see it, but you did. And I let you. That's on me. But it's over now. Dad crossed his arms, his jaw tight. So what? You're just walking away? After everything? Yeah, I said, meeting his gaze. I am. I've given you everything I had. Money, time, my whole damn life, and it's never been enough. I'm not doing it anymore. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Mom wiped her eyes, and Dad just stared at me like he didn't know who I was. Maybe he didn't. I turned to leave, but Mom's voice stopped me at the door. Violet, please. We're family. You can't just... I can, I said, not looking back. And I will. I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me, and drove away without a second glance. My chest ached, a deep, hollow kind of pain, but there was freedom in it too. For the first time, I wasn't running back to fix anything. I was running forward. The next few weeks were a blur of hard choices. I changed my bank account, locked down my credit, cut off every financial tie I had to them. Allie tried calling from a new number twice, leaving voicemails full of fake tears and excuses. Vi, I'm sorry, okay? I got in over my head. Let's talk. I deleted them without replying. Mom sent a text, short and pleading. We need you. I didn't answer that either. Dad didn't reach out at all, and somehow that hurt the most. I threw myself into work, picking up extra hours, saving every dime. My apartment started to feel less like a cage and more like a refuge. I bought a cheap bookshelf, filled it with secondhand novels I'd always wanted to read but never had time for. I cooked real meals, not just frozen dinners, and sat at my tiny table alone, savoring the quiet. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. One night, about a month later, Jess called. Hey, stranger, she said, her voice warm. You okay? I heard Allie's spinning some sob story online about family drama. I laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. Let her spin it. I'm done playing her game. Good for you, Jess said. You deserve better, Vi. Always have. That stuck with me. Better. I'd never thought about what I deserved, only what I owed. But Jess was right. I did deserve better, not just from them, but from myself. So I started building it, piece by piece. I enrolled in an online accounting course, something to boost my skills, maybe get a promotion. I joined a book club at the library, made a few tentative friends, quiet people like me, who didn't demand more than I could give. I stopped looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next guilt trip. Spring came slow that year, the air warming bit by bit. I was 29 now, and for the first time, I felt like I was living my own life, not someone else's. The pain of cutting them off didn't go away. It sat there, a dull ache, but it didn't own me anymore. I was learning to let it go, to let them go. But the story wasn't over yet. Not quite. There was one more moment coming, one that would close the book on the old Violet and open a new one entirely. Spring turned to summer, and I turned 30. It wasn't a big celebration. No party. No cake. Just me, a glass of wine, and a quiet night on my apartment's tiny balcony. I'd strung up some fairy lights I found at a thrift store, and they twinkled against the dusk, casting a soft glow over the potted herbs I'd started growing. Basil, thyme, lavender. Small things, but they were alive because of me, and that felt like enough. The past year had been a slow climb. Cutting ties with my family left a hole, bigger than I'd expected, but I didn't try to fill it with noise or distraction. I let it be, let it heal on its own terms. Work became my anchor, steady, predictable. I finished that accounting course, aced the exams, and pitched myself for a promotion. My boss, a gruff guy named Mike, who rarely smiled, called me into his office one humid July afternoon. "You're good at this, Violet," he said, sliding a new contract across the desk. Senior account manager. More responsibility, better pay. You in? I was. The raise wasn't life-changing, but it was mine money I didn't have to send anywhere but my own future. I opened a savings account, a real one, and watched the numbers grow bit by bit. I bought a new coat that winter, a deep green one that fit me perfectly, and wore it like armor against the cold. Allie's name popped up now and then, friends of friends mentioning her latest posts, her struggle narrative. I didn't look. I heard through Jess that Mom and Dad were still scrambling, still making excuses for her, but they hadn't reached out again. The silence was loud, but I didn't break it. I'd said what I needed to say, and they'd made their choice. So had I. Life wasn't perfect. There were nights I'd lie awake, wondering if I'd been too harsh, if I could have fixed things differently. But then I'd get up, go to work, meet my book club friends for coffee, and realize I didn't want to go back. I'd built something here. A small, steady world that didn't demand my soul in return. I started painting too. Nothing fancy, just watercolors on cheap paper. Swirls of blue and green. Flowers that didn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. It was mine, and that was enough. By the next spring, I'd saved enough to move. Not far, just a one-bedroom apartment across town, with a real kitchen and a window that caught the morning sun. The day I signed the lease, I walked through the empty space, my footsteps echoing, and felt a lump in my throat. This wasn't just a place. It was a line in the sand. Proof I could stand on my own. That summer, something unexpected happened. I met Lena at the book club, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and a dry laugh. She was new in town, a librarian who loved mysteries as much as I did. We started talking, first about books, then about everything else. She didn't push, didn't pry, just listened when I let pieces of my story slip out. One night, over takeout at her place, I told her about Allie, about Mom and Dad, about the years I'd spent fading into the background. She didn't say much, just nodded and squeezed my hand. "You're not invisible to me," she said, and I believed her. Lena became my friend, then something more. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, no grand gestures or movie script lines. It was slow, steady, real. We'd cook together, read together, sit on my balcony with the fairy lights and talk about nothing and everything. She saw me, the messy, quiet, stubborn parts, and didn't look away. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to earn it. The turning point came in March, almost 2 years after I'd walked away from my family. I'd been promoted again assistant director of accounts now, with an office of my own, and I was doing well, better than I'd ever thought I could. Lena and I were solid, not rushing but growing together. I'd started volunteering at a community garden, tending rows of flowers and vegetables with a group of misfits who didn't care about my past. Life felt full, not in a loud way, but in a quiet, rooted one. That spring, the garden planned a big event, a public opening, with food and music and rows of blooming flowers to show off our work. I'd been tending a patch of violets, my namesake, coaxing them through the unpredictable weather. They were stubborn little things, but they'd thrived, their purple petals bright against the green. The day of the event was warm, the sky clear. Lena was there, helping set up tables, and the garden buzzed with kids running around, old folks chatting, volunteers like me beaming with pride. I stood by my violets, watching them sway in the breeze, when Lena came up behind me, slipping her arm around my waist. "They're beautiful," she said, resting her chin on my shoulder. "Just like you." I smiled, a real one, and felt something shift inside me. Not a crack this time, but a release of all the weight I'd carried. I looked out at the crowd, the flowers, the life I'd built, and realized I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I was Violet whole, flawed, free. That night, after the event, Lena and I sat on my balcony, the fairy lights glowing. She turned to me, her eyes soft but serious. "Marry me," she said, Simple as that. No ring, no fuss, just us, the way we'd always been. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, and we laughed, a quiet, joyful sound that filled the air. It wasn't a wedding yet, just a promise. But it felt like a rebirth all the same. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my window, the lavender on my sill in full bloom. I stood there, barefoot on the hardwood, and knew I'd made it. Not to some grand finish line, but to a place where I could breathe, where I was enough. My family was a shadow now, a memory I didn't need to carry. Allie could have her spotlight, Mom and Dad their excuses. I had this, my life, my love, my violets blooming in the sun, and that was more than enough.